Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Wonderful to see all of you here today. I hope you are dry and you didn't have to wade through neck-deep waters. So thank you for coming. This is an opportunistic moment for us because we have two very good international experts here in Ahmedabad on one of the best days that Ahmedabad has to offer. And so thank you very much to all of you for coming. Now, I just want to get my bearings right. So how many of you here in this hall are the new batch of the postgraduate program in the planning faculty? Can you put up your hands? Okay. And then how many of you are from the senior batch of the planning faculty? Okay. We'll wait till all those guys come and take a seat and then move forward. And then how many of you are, all of you, from the Faculty of Planning's undergraduate urban design program? Okay. And how many of you from the Faculty of Management? Okay, they are all of in that island out there. All right. Yeah, I know. Okay, so thank you very much. Let me first, so we have two speakers today, and we call these master classes because they feed into information that we should all have across the board in this, as when you study urban planning, urban design, or urban management. And so Alain Bertaud is an architect, urban planner, he calls himself an urbanist, which is the right title. And he is currently at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University in the Washington, D.C. area. Before that, he was with the New York University. And he was also, at one point, the principal urban planner of the World Bank. So he was a person who, I used to work for the World Bank as well, and all of us used to think of him as the best gift since sliced bread. And so it has been a delight. And then he wrote this book, which I think is one of the best seminal products on urban planning that all of us should understand. And this is something that we at CEPT have always bought into. So I was delighted that the year I took over, this January, as the president of CEPT had decided to give him an honorary doctorate from the Faculty of Planning. So he is, in a sense, an alum of CEPT. So once you graduate, you will be in good company. And with that, I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to ask Alain to, he's a good storyteller. We missed out on, we don't have the time now, but he's writing another book, which he has been talking about, is that all his years of travel through Yemen and through in work in Chandigarh and other places around the world, in China and other places, he was going to give us a storytelling session about all his experiences. But now we don't have the time because we had to cancel sessions yesterday. We would have had that session today. But anyway, he'll come again because he's an alum, so we can always call him over. And so with that, Alain, please.
Thank you very much for attending this talk this morning. Again, it's an auspicious day after all these days of rain. I'm going to try to condensate in one session some part of my book, which, this book came from observing cities. But at the same time, after observation, then some ideas were reinforced by reading I did. And I think that's a that's the right process. It's very dangerous to start with reading one book and then trying to apply it to the world. I think we should first observe reality, especially in the case of cities. We should observe realities ourselves, and then after that, read a number of books and theory and see which one correspond, fit with the reality we have observed. I tell this introduction that way because when I first came to India, I was still a student at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. I had studied for 3 years. At the time, architecture required 8 years with no intermediate degree. And I have read the Corbusier book, La Cité Radieuse, The City of Tomorrow, and I was extremely enthusiastic about it. And so I decided to come to Chandigarh, which was being built. It was in 1963. Pierre Jeanneret, the cousin of Corbusier, were there. And I wanted to visit this masterpiece. So I arrived in Chandigarh. By the way, at the time it was possible. I hitchhiked my way from France to Chandigarh, going through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And I got a job, as a glorified architect. I would say a glorified draftsman at the office of the chief planner in Chandigarh. And suddenly I realized the difference between theories and practice because I had the luck to be working in Chandigarh, not visiting it as a tourist. I think if I visited Chandigarh as a tourist, I would have, it would have reinforced my view about what, of a masterpiece it was. And then I lived there, I worked there, and after work with my colleagues, we will go to a cafe. We didn't have a drink because Chandigarh is dry. I think it was dry. And well, sometimes we smuggled beer from Solan Brewery across the border. But then went to restaurant sometime to eat. I needed new clothes also. And I realized that all these things were valuable, not so much in the city designed by Corbusier, but in the slum which was just next to it, where the people who were building Chandigarh could not afford to live in the city, and they were living in this slum. And for me, that was the reality of, and I realized how different it was from just reading a book in Paris. And so now I will start really my lecture. It's a little long introduction. And so again here, these ideas, I refer sometimes to theories, sometimes a little abstract, but it's always based on observation. Now, my observations are sometimes maybe biased, maybe they are not universal, although I've worked in a lot of different cities, different countries, and I consider myself a bit as a family doctor for cities. And you will never trust a doctor who have had only one patient. So I think that living in different cities is important in learning about cities. Okay, after this long introduction, let's start. So I will condensate my talk and mostly concentrate on the idea of cities as labor market. So first, what attracts people to cities? Why do we have cities? Why people move to cities or sometimes move out of cities? And so my idea that cities are primarily labor market, and how do they work? So I will develop that. And then making labor market more efficient, because it's all good and well to say that cities are labor market, but we know that there are also market failures sometimes. And labor, their efficiency is only potential. There are certain things which have to be met so that those labor work. So I think for an urban planner, it's very important to understand what really make those market work, and to make the difference between what I would call the spontaneous order, which come from the people living in the city who provide this spontaneous order, And then the real estate market and the infrastructure especially, which is required. And finally, I will conclude with what is the role of planners. When you speak about market and let it market play themselves, then some people think, well, then there's no need for planners. It's kind of like a self-organized system. Well, not quite. You need, in a large city, you need infrastructure, you need a support, but you have to support this, spontaneous order. So I will discuss what will be the role of planner. Again, this will be very much condensed. If anything interests you more, you can always read my book. I mean, it's not a plug for my book, but I think it will be more. So, what attracts people to cities? The people do not move to city to comply with a master plan. Every master plan have a projection of population, and I used to, I've been working on a lot of master plan in different cities. For many years, actually, the magical year was the year 2000, when we were developing master plan in 1970s, or 80s. We had always this idea of the year 2000. And then we had a number of people for the year 2000. In India and in Pakistan, there was this idea that the size of cities should be limited, and that large cities like Mumbai or Delhi should stop growing, and then cities which were not growing should grow. For instance, there was plan to develop cities in Himachal Pradesh and stop the growth in Mumbai. There were even perimeters, where, and of course, these were never met. At the time, a lot of people were even thinking that the optimum size of a city was 1 million people. That higher than 1 million, it was a mess. So, for instance, they will use the example of Mumbai, where there were a lot of slums which were developing, and they thought that the slums were due not to the mismanagement of the land and the infrastructure, but were due that there were too many people. It was kind of I would say, an anti-people policy. Well, if you look now, you see in Asia a lot of very large cities. Delhi is assumed to be around 35 million people. You see Tokyo now is, with Yokohama, about 45 million. You see the Pearl River Delta in China, which 90 million people, and soon integrated by transport. The size of Germany as a city. So all this was not because some genius planned those cities saying, this we are going to develop. These cities happen because people move with their feet. They look around in China, they look around in India, they look around in Brazil, and they decided to move to the large cities. Although we know those large cities have problems. When we see, where the poorest people are living in Ahmedabad or in Mumbai or in Sao Paulo, we feel this is hard. This must be very hard to live there. And those people haven't made a choice. They have left the village. For us, these villages are very nice. When you come with your Land Rover and visit a village, it's very beautiful. So why don't the people stay there? Big mango trees and things like that. Well, they decide we have to give them confidence that if they move, they know better about their life in villages, and they know better about their life in cities, and that's why they move. So we have to respect that. We have to understand that. We have to understand what they do and help them integrate in the city life. The job of a city is really to integrate people who have skills which are relevant in a rural area, but those skills are not sometimes very useful in a city. So the role of the city is precisely to introduce them to city life. A successful city will integrate in the city economy a person in maybe 5 or 10 years. If the city is less successful, it may take a generation or two. But what we aim to do is precisely to integrate those people who are moving. So people move to cities not because there is a great infrastructure, not because there is a great climate. They move to cities because of the people who are already here. That means the jobs, and or the universities. For instance, in your case, some of you are moving to Ahmedabad because of university. So we move to cities because of the people who are there. And so that's, that's cover what I So what attracts people to a specific city? Well, the job availability is the most thing here. So when I say that cities are a labor market, people are a little shocked because they say, well, there are more to a city than just getting up in the morning and going to work and then back home in the evening. Obviously, yes. But everything we like in a city, meeting with friends, going to a restaurant, going to a concert, jogging maybe along the river, all those things are possible only if the labor market is working. The day the labor market collapses, that means there are less jobs or the jobs are paying less. All the things we like about cities are disappearing. So when I say that cities are labor market, I am not saying that this is the only thing we count, but the labor market is a foundation on which the city is built. The day the foundation collapse, the city collapse. We had the example, sad example in the US of Detroit at the same time, where Detroit was a very productive, innovative city, not only for automobile, but also in music and art. It has one of the most beautiful art museums in the world, and suddenly all these things disappear within few years because of the labor market collapse. So, of course, among other things, the environment is important. Excuse me. Street life, restaurant, things like that. But again, this exists only if the labor market works. So before I start addressing cities itself, because we are talking about city growing because people select to go to cities, or some cities and not to others, I would like to talk a bit about demography, and in particular the fertility rate have been falling everywhere except in Africa and part of the Middle East, and that is completely changing my perspective. When I was teaching at NYU, at the end of my classes, I told my students, all my life, my professional life, my job was to help increase the size of city. More people were moving to cities, and the main problem was how fast can you develop the infrastructure to respond to the demand of the new migrants. And then suddenly I see that a lot of cities around the world are in fact starting to decrease in population in the most advanced country like Japan, for instance, or Korea. And this is due to a fall in the fertility rate. First, we thought that this fall of fertility rate will be only in Europe and maybe Japan and Korea. And now I realize, that it's all over the world. I mean, with, again, the exception of Africa. I was in Thailand 4 months ago, and to my surprise, again, the fertility rate in Thailand is 1.3. That means that much below the reproduction rate of 2.1. That suddenly affects cities. So we are going to look a bit what will happen and which city will grow in spite of the lower fertility rate and which city will probably shrink, which then it will be a challenge for urban planners. The first time I was confronted to these shrinking cities were about 15 years ago. I was consulting in Russia, but I was supposed to review the regulation of St. Petersburg and Moscow, and a Russian colleague came to me and say, would you be interested in helping us? We are closing 60 cities in Russia. We're closing cities. I said, I've never worked on a closing city. I've always worked in expanding cities. And then he explained to me what happened, that declining population, labor market collapsing in cities which were badly located in Siberia, the central planning, and they had to close cities of sometimes 200,000 people. It's a problem. I say, I cannot help you. I have no idea what to do in this situation like that. I'm completely incompetent. In a professional life, sometimes it's very important to ensure people that you are incompetent. So let us look at the fertility rate. India, according to the data I have, still a fertility rate of, right now 2.12, which is just maintaining the current population. It's projected to decrease to 1.7. This is a UN projection. China, and so in the 1950, we were all, all these three countries that I show here were at around 590 for India, 648 for China, 612 for Brazil. According to the UN, 2100, all those countries will be around 1.7. That means that they will have lost a significant amount of population. What will that mean for labor markets? I look here at the age pyramid of 4 countries: Nigeria, India, China, and Germany, all in 2023. The people who are in the labor market here are the people who are between those two lines here, the two green line here. So you see that India, in a way, is probably right now one of the most favorably placed in terms of active population in the labor market. With one caveat, though. Here I am showing, I am showing, you have male in blue on the left and female on the right. In India, female participation in the labor market is very low. You probably have idea why it is so, but so there is a potential here of increasing the labor market by increasing female participation in the labor force. So again here, compared to your current situation, you have a possibility of having a larger labor market than the current one, in spite of the demography. Now you look at China, and so in 10 or 20 years, you see, the cohort we are here below that, the young people, are going to move up, and the people who are near the top, the people who are near the top here are going to be retired. So you see, they are going to be replaced by much fewer people. And then you will have a shrinking labor market. Now, imagine if you are an enterprise and you want to expand your enterprise and move to a new city. Are you going to move to a city which has a shrinking labor market? That means that you get more people being retired than people entering the market. That means that you will have difficulty hiring young people. Don't forget, too, that younger people are very often more innovative than older people like me. So the labor market is not only the number of people, it's the number of people who are young and the number of people who are old. So the old one, we have some qualities still, we have experience in like that. But really, the people who will deliver are the young, are you guys here. And so again, when you look at the labor market, you have to look at their age. So look at what happened in Japan. The size, the growth of cities. My data here is a little old, but I couldn't find an updated one presented that way. 2001, 2010. Horizontally here, you have the number of people in thousand. That means in million. The line, vertical line here is 5 million, and vertically, you have the growth of cities. The black line here is 0%. So any city which is below this line is decreasing in population. And you see that practically nearly all the cities below 5 million have a decreasing population. That means a shrinking labor market. The only cities which are growing are usually more than 5 million. The highest one is Tokyo. Why so? The young people in these cities are going to Tokyo because they are looking for work. They have usually good universities in those universities, in these cities. Going to Tokyo, it's a more dynamic city. Unless they have a strong interest in geriatrics, there is no point in staying where they are here. I visited the city of Toyama here. Here, which was shrinking at 1.5%. And again, the mayor asked me advice what to do, and I told him, I don't know. I don't have a clue what to do in a shrinking city. And I think that it's a problem you will have to address one day, but I cannot give you advice, I don't know. It's a bit, I think, like inflation. We know how to deal with inflation, more or less. I mean, we know how to deal with inflation. We have more difficulty dealing with deflation. We don't quite know how to do it. And I think that will be the same. So that will be a challenge for your generation. So here we are. If I had the same graph for India, so we have not a problem of Japan here. You see that, in fact, smaller cities, around 5 million or 10 million, are growing pretty well. Surat, Malappuram, Kochi, and the larger city, Mumbai, Delhi, are still growing, as rather healthy rate. So you don't have this problem yet, but in my opinion, it's coming. So you see here, it's another way to present the same data. You have the bars are the size of the population, and the dots, the orange dots, are the growth rate. So again, here you have a rather healthy situation where the smaller city are growing a little faster than the larger one, which is a good thing. So it reflects a rather healthy situation. So let us look now how labor market works. Again, the importance of the labor market for planners. Planners very often do not think of that, but I think it's very important if you are an urban planner or even an architect to understand the importance of this labor market. So first, again, we should address this idea that smaller cities are more pleasant, easier to manage than larger ones. Yes, it's true, probably. But strangely enough, in spite of pollution, in spite of congestion, in every cities of the world, we find that larger cities, the people who are in larger cities, are more productive and innovative than the one in smaller cities. And it seems, if you have been to city even more congested than Mumbai or Delhi, like Bangkok or Jakarta, you find it hard to believe that, but when you look at the data, it's obvious. So why is it? It is because when a lot of people get together and exchange ideas, they are more productive than if they are alone thinking about something. And we are also all very specialized, and we have also very different character. We have different talent. Although you may be in the same class as your friends, but you have different skill probably, which are innate, maybe inherited, maybe something like that. And if you put together people who have very different skill, different point of view, they are more productive than if you are people who have been always in the same village and talking together. So this is why large cities are important. And that's why we should not be shy to face the reality of, again, people coming to large cities, even if those cities are already very large and congested, like Delhi or Mumbai or Calcutta. So let's just very quickly go over what all those markets work. In the, excuse me, the traditional monocentric model is this, and it was a model which was valid for many years. You have a lot of jobs and amenities in the center city, and higher density in the center city, and people move from the suburb to the center. So you have here dispersed origin of trip, but you have concentrated destination. So this monocentric model is probably valid in cities of less than 1 million most of the time, roughly represent the reality. But we'll see that it's not very much real in larger cities. Then we have the dispersed model, this one, which emerged mostly in North America when large cities start growing and the main means of transport was the automobile, the car. The car allows people to move around anywhere, not necessarily toward the center. And in a city like Los Angeles or Atlanta, for instance, which is very representative of this type of trip patterns, jobs are dispersed, nearly uniformly through the city. So you have trips which have dispersed origin and dispersed destination. For those type of trips, we don't know how to do mass transportation. The car or the motorcycle is only efficient way of moving from suburb to suburb. We have not found very efficient way of moving from suburb to suburb. Most cities, and I think that will represent Ahmedabad or even Mumbai, are in fact the superimposition of those two models. You have quite a number of trips from suburbs to the center or within the center, but you have also an increasing number of trips from suburb to suburbs. And again here, you have a new subway in Ahmedabad. All the trips which are from suburb to the center will be greatly improved by the subway, but for the trips which are from suburb to suburb, the subway will be probably less efficient. And again, you will have here to find new means of transport, either individual means of transport like the motorcycle or the car, or maybe some combination of modes, the equivalent of a Uber Transit or something like that, which will bring you to stations or bring you to things like that. So fortunately, there are emerging technology now which will probably help to solve this problem, but they are just starting. And finally, I want to represent this model that I have never found in reality, but reviewing master plans all over the world, I found this idea all the time, and you certainly have read about the 15-minute city promoted in Paris recently. The idea is that you could have a very large metropolitan area, but we, very smart urban planners, could organize the job and the people in such a way that you will find everything within 15 minutes walking distance from your house. So if it is a grocery store or a bakery, that's quite possible. If you have relatively high income and a high density, high density, for instance, the walled city of Ahmedabad, you certainly find anything to eat or clothes within 15 minutes walk. There is no doubt about it. Finding a job is a little different. If you move to Ahmedabad, it's because there is a very large labor market, a lot of offer of different jobs. You are not going to say, I select my house, and after that, I will walk 15 minutes and find my job within here. Obviously not. You are going to look from the... So this model is really very convenient for urban planners because they say, you see, if we organize people that way, we don't need to invest in transit. We don't need to invest in things like that. We will have the life of a village. It will be wonderful. It doesn't exist. It exists only in the mind of urban planners. And this is what, now, we can make a joke about it. The problem with that, it's, if people believe that, it's a distraction from solving the real problem. Now you don't, you are trying to create job next where the people are, and it's not necessarily where the job will happen, and it's not necessarily what the job that the people will want will live there. So again, it might be a very, very damaging distraction. Finally, you have very large conurbation, which are a bit different even from that. And you could say that Delhi already is organized that way, with several sub-centers. Jakarta now is more and more that way. So is Bangkok. In China, there are cluster cities also around Shanghai, and especially the Pearl River Delta, Shenzhen, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Guangzhou. And these are even more complex, but they have still an advantage in terms of productivity. I will pass that. This is just to show, this is Manhattan, the way density change during the day and each day of the week. You see this movement is just like a tide, and the job of the planner is to allow this to function, to allow this movement, so that you don't lose too much time in going to work or going out to work. There is not only, transport is in a city is not only going to work, it's also the freight. There is an enormous amount of freight going around in a city. It could be just a building material to repair and maintain the existing building, but it could be also Amazon or the delivering thing. It could be, if you go to a restaurant, don't forget that every day this restaurant has to be fed with a truck will bring food and a bottle of beer or something like that, or whatever, or soft drinks, sorry. So this freight is very important. If you, a city without vehicle, which will be only on transit. So some people advocate a city which will have only bicycle and transit, will not be viable. This 10% or 15% of freight is absolutely essential for maintaining a city. So this I've been talking about spontaneous order. I take here 12 cities where I have measured the density myself. So horizontally, we have distance from city center, 0 to 30 kilometers, and vertically, we have the density in people per hectare measure. It's a built-up density. That means it's a density that of the area which is already built, not if there is a big field, it's not counted, or a very large part. So here we have four continents. We have Europe, Paris, Warsaw, Barcelona, Beijing, Jakarta, Bangkok, Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York, Rio de Janeiro, Buenos Aires, Mexico City. Those cities have nothing to do with each other. They have a completely different history, different culture, different climate, different economy. And in spite of that, all of them follow a density gradient that economists explain to us why it happened. It's really the land market which works that way. So it's a spontaneous order. This has not, those density gradients, the decrease in density from the center to the periphery is not something which has been designed by planners. It's something which has emerged spontaneously. It's a way people locate themselves because of the advantage of being in a suburb or the advantage of being a center. And you find that across culture, across climate, across economy. So this is what I call the spontaneous order. The job of the planner is to monitor and understand what is the spontaneous order in a given city. This is, yesterday we had a very interesting presentation on analysis of densities and prices in Madras, in Chennai. I'm an old guy. So this was, I think, in terms of monitoring, this was an extremely interesting job, because it really took, it looked at all the densities and the prices change over years. So this is really understanding this order, this spontaneous order. And the job of the planner is not to contradict this order. The job of the planner is to provide an infrastructure to support this. That means to put the school in the right place where the people are, the young people are, to put water supply and try to organize transport. So some people say, well, yes, but with the pandemic, things have changed. People still, can work from home. Well, it's not quite true. A number of people can work from home. That will relieve some of the congestion, probably. It's a good thing. Maybe some people will change cities also. That's possible. But the effect really is not as large as people thought. The large company, if you look at the large company, in particular Silicon Valley, where there are more people who are likely to work from home, those people first they build enormous headquarters with fantastic restaurant where women, for instance, parents can bring their children there. So they are trying to attract the maximum number of people at the headquarters the most time possible. Why? Again, because this idea that the more people are together, exchange ideas, the more different people exchange ideas, the more productive they are. And of course, Silicon Valley is thriving on productivity and innovation. It's not a routine work. So it's possible that some routine activity will change because of the pandemic, following the pandemic. For instance, maybe if you are a bookkeeper, for instance, you don't want a bookkeeper to be too imaginative, probably, or creative. So a bookkeeper can work from home, and that's possible. But I think it's a relatively small number of things. So I think that cities are still, and large cities are still likely to grow. Now, the trend in the 21st century, now I see the emerging of very large megacities of 50 million or more. But then there will be shrinking cities in the other part of the world. And the shrinking city will be the one who have shrinking labor market, where the labor market is not working, or because they failed to organize this labor market. Detroit was not destroyed by a shrinking population. Shrinking population followed the destruction of the market. It was not. So it's a bad management thing. Then you have falling demography. So again here, it's an interesting concept because demography, many of those countries, Europe, Japan, Korea, China, normally could deal with it by having an intelligent immigration policy. There are plenty of people around the world who have the skill which can be filled in those countries. And for some reason, either they see immigration as charité for poor people, or to the contrary, a threat to their own civilization. And with a few exceptions, maybe of Canada or a few countries, where immigration is considered to be an economic necessity. It's not. I think that many of those countries will have to revise their things, or they will shrink. And so we will see, I think, much more migration from poorer countries to cities which are already more efficient. And again, this will be dealt mostly by politics, unfortunately, not by economics. So, making labor market more efficient. First, we have to understand how market work, and the profile of density, again, is something that is very important to monitor. This is, I represent here again the monocentric model. We found that in a city like Los Angeles and Atlanta, strangely enough, although they are not monocentric at all, we still have a profile which is very similar. We know, with a gradient. Why? Because all the jobs are distributed evenly. If you are located near the center of Atlanta or of Los Angeles, you are still closer to all the jobs rather than if you are in the periphery. and that's explained. So of course the gradient is much flatter. You know, the advantage of being the center of Los Angeles is less than being the center of London or Delhi, but it's still there. So you have to understand that. The land price follow also a negative gradient in general. Now, when you have megacities, of course, this gradient will be modified, reflecting, the polycentricity of the city when they are. But land price follow also, this gradient. You see that 2010 Sydney land price. Sydney also is a rather polycentric city and a complicated one, but you see those follow. So these are things, they should be monitored very carefully. And those prices mean something. How far away should a city expand? The theory, and I think it's real, is that if you have a price of land per square meter, so this price, horizontally you have distance from the city center, and vertically you have a price per square meter of land. So the price will follow this negatively sloped curve, and at a certain time in the suburb, it will meet the price of agricultural land. So if you have very fertile land, this line will be higher. If you are in the desert, this line will be practically at zero. So the expansion of the city is usually defined by the intersection of the price of agricultural land and the price of urban land. If you are here, if you want to locate here, the farmer will not sell you his land because the price of urban land will be lower than farming. Now, this of course can be very much distorted by the price of transport. For instance, if you are in a city in the Middle East where gasoline is heavily subsidized, of course, this gradient will be very different. If you are in a country where agriculture is heavily subsidized, in particular, irrigation, then the green line here will go up. And then, of course, you have regulations which will prevent people from converting agricultural land, although the price. Then you will have an informal sector going there. So you have to understand all these things. I think if you have a planner, although your job will be to design street, to design things, please understand those things. So here, let us look at briefly. This was AUDA master plan, development plan, sorry. So here you have a number of zones. In particular, the green one, the light green, are agricultural with low yield, and the darker green there. So, and you have the center of Ahmedabad here. If you superimpose land prices on that, what does it mean? Try, instead of thinking, I am the planner, I'm going to design this city, try to take it the other way around. Imagine that you are a farmer here, just in this green belt here, and close to this road. And so you have a little piece of land, and that gives you an income every year, which is not very high. If you can afford a motorcycle, probably you'll get a better income just moving to a building site and working in the city than what you get from your land. So although your land here is in an agricultural area, if a developer comes and offer you money, which is much higher than 10 years of income from your land, what do? Are you going to sell your land and open a little shop somewhere? Or are you going to say, no, I'm going to till my land because the planner put me in a green zone. How can I change? This is the way you have developed. So you have to look at regulation that way. You can enforce regulation only if it makes sense. drawing line on a plan. I'm not saying, by the way, that this plan prevents that now. I know things are much more liberal. But for a long time, and I think still now, it's difficult to convert legally agricultural land into urban land. I think that this is very counterproductive. If you want to have an effective labor market which can compete later, even when your population decreases, you will have to review all this regulation so that you can match the supply of land with the number of jobs which are being created in the city. So again here, these are not to exercise. The graph I show of density before and land prices and the master plan. These are two things which have to be put together. And when you see a contradiction, I think economics should prevail, not abstract thinking about the way a city should look like. So this is again now the good news in Ahmedabad is that I'm not saying that because I'm invited here and with a very friendly introduction. But Ahmedabad as a way of developing land with TP schemes, which in all the cities I've visited, that include, by the way, Europe and Latin America and the US. It's only city I've seen where I think the supply of land is matching slowly, not completely, but it's closer to matching the demand because the possibility of developing land and linking it to the transport system in advance of development. And without really very heavy government intervention. And I think that this matching of supply and demand for land is very important. I hope that you can maintain that. Certainly the TP scheme can be improved, I suppose. The process can be maybe faster. I think it's very important. So this is an image, I don't take for, even if I look at data which are provided for me the proof is really looking at satellite imagery and comparing them and counting things, la reality. So the reality is this. You see, this was the image of the same neighborhood in 2001 and 2018. You see the number of new housing which has been built there. This is spectacular. And they are all linked. The important thing is all of them are linked to a network of transport. Now, whether those transport, you have buses which are efficient or not, I don't know. Some of them you have a BRT or they're not. Whether sometime you have certain things which could be improved, possible. But the right of way of the transport system is here. You are linked to the infrastructure. So maintaining the supply of land in advance of urbanization is very important. And that's a way you will avoid the growth of slums or people who are living in the city but they are not really part of the labor market because they have no access. They have access to maybe 20% of the job instead of 100% of the job. So I think this is something wherever you work after in India or somewhere else, maintaining this supply of land and supply of developable land linked to the infrastructure, linked to the transport system would be very important. So the role of planner with all that. So first, maintaining a database and monitoring what's happening. Developing indicators, that means also developing blinking indicators. If you see that the number of jobs offered is much less than the number of building permits which are given, the number of units which are given, this is a blinking indicator. It means that suddenly the new jobs are going to bring more money in the city, but there will be no more housing. That means all the houses which are here, the price will go up, and the people who are the poorest will not afford them, and they will have to live in a slum. So this is a blinking indicator. That means, as a planner, if you see this happening, you should not wait 10 years to say, hey, slum have increased, the informal sector has increased. You should do something. What to do, I don't know. Depend on the city, it will be very different. It could be to improve transport, it could be to develop more TP scheme or a different way maybe. It could be different thing. But you have to do something. And this is based, so again here, we are not talking here about a master plan every 10 years. We are talking about monitoring every quarter what is happening, the number of building permits, the amount of water which is going into the system, how many people are connected to water. Of course, schools and health facility also have to follow. So, and then you have to propose strategies. Now, when we propose strategy, usually most politician or even planner will look only at input. They will say, education is terrible. We are going to spend 100 crores on education in the next 5 years. Fine. This is not what is important. What is important is establish an indicator of performance. Spending money on education is not the equivalent of having an educated workforce. So you have to have an indicator of outcome, not only of input. And so there I said, in my book I describe there are intermediary indicators too, but you have to monitor. If after 3 or 4 years you find that the outcome is not what you expected, change strategy. There is nothing wrong with being wrong in a strategy, but you have to change it. Unfortunately, in urban, we keep doing exactly the same thing. For instance, now in New York, I see that housing is completely unaffordable, and people are saying, why don't we do rent control? We have tried rent control for 100 years. Every time it fails, and we still keep doing it. You imagine if a firm like Apple suddenly they come up with a telephone. Well, Apple in the old days sometime had computers which didn't work very well. Immediately they changed the design of the computer. They didn't say, hey, this in our master plan, during 10 years we're going to produce this fail computer. So the city has to do the same thing. Evaluate what works and say, hey, you cannot test a city in a laboratory, so you have to do it in real time. But then when you are wrong, you're wrong, and you change. And there is nothing, your virtue is not to be right all the time. Your virtue is to change when it's wrong. Oops, sorry. Oh, what happened? I have a problem here. Well, I was toward the end of my talk, but...
You've also lost amplification, so you have to speak really loud.
Oh. Yes? That's all right? Okay. Okay, I'm lost my slide, but well, that's all right. That's happened. So I think that's this monitoring of cities. Instead of just planning with new idea, monitor what is happening, and then when you develop infrastructure, for instance, on this satellite imagery that I show you of Ahmedabad or the plan, what is important, and I think what was done long ago, was to develop around Ahmedabad a system of roads, and a hierarchy of roads. You have the ring road and you have major road and minor road. I think establish the right-of-way of those roads in advance is very important. Not all the roads, again, the minor roads are done by the TP scheme, scheme by scheme, that's fine. But the major road has to be established in advance. A good example of that was the grid of New York, for instance, of Manhattan. Sorry? Sorry? The microphone? Yes? Yeah. So the grid of Manhattan, or if you take Barcelona, for instance, in the middle of the 19th century, there was a plan to develop Barcelona, which was more than 15 times the existing size of Barcelona. I think that was a very, separating what is public from what is private is the main job of planner. So that the market can play on what is private very clearly, long in advance. There is no uncertainty about expropriation later or something like that, and that's the main job of planner. After that, so how can you project? For instance, if you think of the grid of Manhattan, when it was done, Nobody had any idea about a subway or even a car or a bus. So the widths, so the widths of the street of Manhattan or Barcelona were established by people who thought that most transport would be either walking or by horse cart. I don't think it matters that much. I think what matters, and the success of Barcelona and New York was precisely to establish in advance what was private and what was public. And and that was the job of the planner. So this is top down. This is top down. But this top down exercise allow the spontaneous order then to flourish, because then it's very clear when you can build your house or set your enterprise, and that you will be next to a big road, or contrary to in a very quiet street or something like that. You know that in advance. You have also to protect things like the shore of a river, for instance, should be protected and should be accessible to the public. The shore of the sea, you can see that, for instance, in Mumbai, very important to protect and to have it, outside the market, to be a public good. So establishing the size of the public good is a top-down exercise. There is no, I don't believe very much in, say, 15% of open space or something like that. What depends, the quality of the open space is much more important than its dimension. For instance, Marine Drive in Mumbai is a fantastic open space because of its quality. The equivalent in a park somewhere which will be badly maintained will not be equivalent. So this is my recommendation. I think planners have a lot to do. Do not think that because I talk about spontaneous order, I think that the city is just going spontaneously. It's just that you have to recognize the two order. What is your role and what is not your role? And if you try to over-regulate the private sector and neglect the public sector, that means the roads, I think you will not be very efficient. I think that we should, as a planner, we should concentrate much more, for instance, on the use of road, the right-of-way. If you look at the right-of-way of many roads in Ahmedabad, you will see that maybe up to 50% are kind of encroachment, not encroachment necessarily by people, sometimes by the electricity company or by the water company who had dug a hole and never filled it. So you see the best use of this existing land is very, very important, and this is really under the control. Thank you very much. Question?
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Alan,
Yes.
for a wonderful session. Talking about the role of planners, I think this is very, very important, especially because all of us, in some ways, are working in this area of
Yeah, this is, no.
Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. So thank you, Alan, for a wonderful session talking about the role of planners, and rather than making plans which do not work, how do we understand the patterns of the city and how do we respond to that? So now we'll have a Q&A round. Any questions anybody has? Yes. Okay, can we have students first before we start with the faculty members? Or maybe we can start here and then, yeah.
Right. So thanks, Alan, for a wonderful lecture, and I've been meaning to ask you this question for a long time. So I think currently in last 10 years in India, the FAR has been liberalized by and large.
Yes.
I mean, there are problems, but there are caps, but they are liberalized. Now what has started happening is that the inner city redevelopment project are completely outcompeted by the highway-oriented projects because land is cheaper on the highway and lot of developers have negotiated higher FAR. So question one is that should we worry about it as Indian planners? Number two, if we add the layer of public transport, then highways are not very well serviced by, the peripheral area in the city are not very well serviced by public transport. Inner city areas are serviced better by public transport, and many cities are building metro. So even from that context, people are going to get locked into a car-centric lifestyle in the periphery. And then again, the question is, should we worry about that as well?
You see, again here, when you see something that is not meeting your expectation, try to find why. Why would, if I understand well, you are concerned about high densities along linear urban highway. That's yes. Correct, yes. Well, maybe because it's the only land available for, and which is, by the way, still more accessible. If your public transport doesn't work, then car or motorcycle is the only way to get there. So you don't want to be at the end of a small dirt lane. You have to be close to a highway if you have a car or a motorcycle. So maybe you should have a different, transport system. Say more accessible roads somewhere else. If maybe what you suggest here is that you are not developing enough primary road. So the problem is not the FSI. The FSI. To me, the FSI should be always higher than demand. If you have an FSI of 5, you should be happy if most of what is built is 3 or 4. That means that you are not constraining where people are. And I think even, I remember in Poland many years ago where they moved to central planning to market. The idea in the center of Warsaw is to remove FSI completely, and I think it worked well. They didn't build a skyscraper of 1 kilometer high. They built at the time what the demand was, and the cost of construction limited. When you go up, so you end up with some 20-story, 30-story building. So I think here the problem you mentioned is not the FSI. It is the lack of relatively fast transport to where the jobs are. And I think that's again this top-down thing. It's somebody has designed somewhere a road, maybe a ring road, maybe I don't know. Again, it depends on the situation.
And the first part where we said the inner city redevelopment projects.
Sorry?
The inner city redevelopment project where the land is being recycled.
Yes.
There is a very slow progress of that.
Yes, right, yes.
Should we worry about that?
Yes, right, yes. So that again, sometime, very often, by the way, that's a major problem in the US now, in the process to redevelop. You get into lawsuit, or the process itself is very complicated. You need a permit from the fire department and another one from the water department, thing like that. And so sometimes it's not the regulation itself, it is a process. And very often bureaucrats do not understand that waiting 5 or 10 years for a building permit has an enormous cost, and discourage the provision of anything which is cheap housing, for instance. You cannot build cheap housing if you need a lawyer for 10 years in order to be able to build 20 units. So the process, the regulation, but also the process.
Hello, sir. I'm a second year infrastructure student.
Yes.
I have a doubt. So you said that as planners, we are supposed to respond to the city and spontaneity
Yes.
order by providing adequate infrastructure to the spontaneity order. So from what I can understand, I feel that it is more about development based infrastructure approach, whereas we had approach in our last studio which is infrastructure based development. First we provide adequate infrastructure where we where the development thrives later, but this is something contradicting that approach is what I understand. If you could give more insight on it, that would be great.
Yes. You see, there is a tendency in cities, planners are more interested in greenfields, they want than in existing city. So I think that very often they neglect, for instance, both transport and sometimes water supply and sometimes social services in existing area, including, by the way, in informal area. And because they are more interested in a blank slate, they are like me. They are architects. Architects like to start with a blank slate. We don't want to deal with, and I think that, you have a number of cities. I remember Karachi, for instance. I used to work on the master plan of Karachi many years ago. There were a lot of slums around Karachi. A high density, probably about 50% of the population living in slums. At the same time, the city had hired Doxiadis architect to develop toward the north, and there were miles of roads, schools, with nobody there. There were even street lamps. Well, at the same time, Gandhinagar looked like that, actually. Some years ago, you were too young to know, but you had even street lamps in Gandhinagar, where there were no street lamps in many streets of Ahmedabad. So I think that what my message is that look at where the people are, but at the same time, I've said you need to be sure that there is a supply of land in the suburbs of the city. So you have to do both. But to think that it's your infrastructure which would, for instance, some planners sometimes say, a linear city will be nice, or we should develop, to the south or to the west. I think it's wrong. I think they should, again, look at land prices and things like that, and they should be guided by where the people want to move. And so, clearly, in a certain way, if you develop a grid, like Barcelona did in the 19th century, you see where the people are the grid was not entirely built. It was just a right of way. So you see where the people are moving, and then you, at that time, you move the infrastructure. But my problem very often with this infrastructure-guided development is that planners want to be creative. I don't think they should be creative. They should be responsive to the need of the city is made of the people who live there. A city, you don't move to a city because it has nice highways. You move to a city because there is a good university, because there are libraries, because there are concerts, because the people who are there. So the attention has to be to the people, and you don't quite know. Everything is changing. The income are changing, the price of land changing, the mean of transport are changing. Now you are using more and more scooters. Probably very soon everybody will have an electric scooters. That will change a bit where the density will be distributed. So you have to respond to that and not say, oh, the people are moving in the wrong place because I designed my highway or my light rail or my BRT there. They should be there. I've seen that hundreds of times, where you change the zoning along your infrastructure in order that the people to move there, to force them to move there, where in fact probably they want to move somewhere else. Sorry, long response, but.
Hi, sir. Listen.
Yes.
I think the concept of shrinking cities was quite interesting to me. personally, I've lived close to a shrinking city for 2 years, and I am from Ahmedabad, which is in a very different state of
Yes, yes.
time at this time. But if you look at the world as this big one city, certain cities are going down, certain cities are
Yes.
going up. So cities which are going up or places which are going up, linking those to their labor markets works very well because we can very nicely understand what needs to be done.
Right.
For cities which are in this downward spiral, if I can call it
Yes,
so,
yes.
what is the thing that we can link it to there? Because the labor market is not there. At
Yes,
that point
yes,
of time.
yes, yes.
What is it? What could be something that we could link it to at least maintain a certain quality of life, or whatever is there to maintain it?
You know, my first reaction is I don't know. But my second reaction is check why the people are leaving. So if they are leaving because of demography, there's not much you can do about it. If they are living like in Detroit because of mismanagement of the city, you know, then look at that. It could be also, for instance, recently I've been involved in a city in the Midwest in the U.S., which is not very large, and if you look at all the young people are leaving. If you look at the regulation, although the city is shrinking, housing is very expensive because they do not allow a relatively small, studio or one-bedroom apartment for some reason. The zoning is, and so if you look at those things, maybe that's a reason why people are leaving. It's possible also that some cities have what economists call comparative advantage. It could be the climate, the scenery, the environment. It could be proximity to a trade route or something like that. So you could exploit this comparative advantage to a city. But frankly, when a city is shrinking, and it's not due to an obvious reason, regulatory reason, I don't know the solution. And I'm waiting for you young people to find the solution. I don't know.
Hi sir, firstly it was really great insights, and I'm a first year student.
Yes.
Also very lot of people, not just me, everyone.
Yeah.
Sir, I had a question in response for Total sir that
Yes.
I also asked. So it's based on Kolkata. Now I'm from Kolkata, eastern
Yes.
India. So
Yes.
there's this issue in Kolkata, it cannot move eastward because
Yes.
there's an ecological sensitivity.
Right, yeah,
It
yeah.
cannot move westward.
Right.
because there's a river. It has to move either north or south.
Yes.
Now government last 10-15 years back, it has decided to make a new CBD on the north.
Yes. Yes.
Now whenever a new CBD is being made, it seems that the roads are wide and everything, but there's always a bottleneck as we move from the older part to the newer part.
Yes.
Now currently Newtown, people are going in because jobs are moving, but Newtown is still growing. Now if we look at the older CBD, it has, since people are moving into Kolkata, we saw the growth rate.
Yes.
The older CBD is declining, but the newer CBD is increasing. Now, older CBD declining as in the growth rate is declining. There's an overall increase, but the rate of growth is less.
Right. Yes. Yes. It's a yes.
So, we know in the next 15 or 20 years, CBD will completely shift to Newtown. So, how do we plan in this case when we know the older city structure, it will grow for next 10-15 years, but eventually it will decrease. But the problem still exists because there's
Yes.
this bottleneck and overall the city is increased.
I think that in this case, first you point to an interesting question. Should Calcutta has been developing a new, this is in a way relatively similar to Gandhinagar, and so you have a city, I have not been to Calcutta for quite a while, but I still remember it well. You have a city which has still a deficiency in infrastructure, pretty dense downtown, a deficiency in infrastructure. And the government invests a lot in an empty land. So, and it takes a long time. Again, you move to cities because of the people who are there. So that's why it's so slow at the beginning to move to a new city, because there is nobody there. So there might be, street light, There might be a nice even school, but probably there is school, but there is no teacher yet. So why would you move there? You know, when you are in a city, you have your friends, you have your relative. Moving is not that easy. So, and you don't move again to a city because the roads are nicely asphalted. You know, you expect, you hope the road will be nicely asphalted, but you move because of things. So during a long time, you had this investment in infrastructure, and as resources are limited, that means there will be less investment in infrastructure in the existing city, so accelerating in a way the decay of the old city. So, but now the thing is done, you cannot reverse it. So how do you deal with this option which was taken in the past? In my opinion, you could have two centers. You know, the idea, if you give up right now and say, well, the city is going to move north, then the inner city will decay even more. I'm sure that the inner city have a comparative advantage. You know, it has certainly more cinemas. It has probably more. You know, Bengali are very cultured, so I'm sure there are many bookstores also and things like that. So these are assets which are there, and it would be a shame to have them decay and disappear. So you could reinforce. You have to look at what should be done in the old city to maintain its life. Maybe a lot of work in infrastructure, I suppose storm drainage and sewer and things like that. Maybe paving roads. Maybe also some allowing some redevelopment, so you have more modern structure, you know, shops, maybe department store, I don't know. But I will be very uneasy to say, well, we are giving up on the old city, because that will mean misery for millions of people for a long time. And in a way concentrating on few people who have moved on the new city and which are already privileged. I mean, in terms of infrastructure, they are privileged. In my opinion, they may be pretty bored there, but that's my opinion, of course.
Hello, sir. I'm also a PG first year student. The question is connecting with the example that was given by my fellow mate. Is like, is there anything of death of the CBD? Cause I'm also from Kolkata. I have seen that the expansion of the new town and the northern part of the city. On the other hand, the old CBD is slowly declining. I mean, it's congested, and there are some issues that we have seen so far. In the case of new town that is emerging as a new CBD and the context of the accessibility and the more better infrastructure development, so in that case, is it something like death of a CBD is exist, or is it like something more that we need to have more focus on the infrastructure for the old CBD to make it function?
I think that, by the way, it's possible that the existing CBD will be better off with slightly less people. It could be that it's overcrowded. And you know, if you look at, for instance, New York or Paris, if you look at Manhattan or Paris, the center of Paris, there is now in Paris 1 million less people than there were in 1900. And it's because people are richer and they consume more floor space, more land. So it was not a bad thing that some people left the center of Paris to, more modern housing in the suburbs, or the same happened in Manhattan too. So I suppose that, as you know, again, my last visit to Calcutta was quite long ago, and yes, it was very overcrowded. There was a very small, if you look at the consumption of floor space in the area near the center, is very, very low. If I remember, but I might be wrong now, there was something like 3 or 4 square meters per person of floor space, was very low. So in a way, in this sense, the expansion of the city to the north is a good idea and could relieve the congestion and in a way provide a new life to the old city. So it's not entirely negative. What I will argue against is giving up on the old city, saying now we move to, it's a bit like a smartphone. You bought your smartphone 5 years ago, and there is a new one coming, and you throw it away, and you buy the new one. I think this is wrong for a city. So you should not abandon it. And for instance, in the same idea, I worked a lot in Jakarta, and I'm very worried about the new capital of Indonesia in Borneo, in Kalimantan, because it means starving Jakarta from infrastructure. And without infrastructure, big infrastructure investment, the people there will suffer. Now, you have 30 million people in Jakarta, nobody yet, or maybe 20 people in Nusantara, in the new capital, although the infrastructure of the new capital is already enormous. So again, it's a political decision. I don't want to argue with the president of Indonesia, but as a planner, I'm a little worried about that. So do not give up on old city. Just try to find what is good for them. And in a way, in the case of Calcutta, because of the traditional overcrowding, I think it was a good idea to expand to the north. Whether it was a good idea to have an entirely new city rather than a suburb, I don't know. But expanding the land supply in a way is a good thing.
Okay, so I have another question regarding the transportation.
Yes.
It's like there are so many negative issues that we are facing each and every day in the city, like while traveling way around. So in the case of measuring safety as an urban planner, how do we focus on that context?
Safety, sorry.
Safety and the measures of like daily transport community.
Yes. Well, Calcutta here as a bit of a liability. It's because it's becoming a linear city in a way, north-south, and in a way the new city reinforced that. A linear city, I mean, it's not completely linear, but it's a long and narrow strip, and a linear city is always, the transport is very difficult to manage because it's all go, the entire city go in one direction and another. So you have to deal with it probably to build parallel corridors. I'm not sure of feasibilities because again, the topography of Calcutta, especially with the pits which has been created to bake bricks, to make the bricks. Fragment the land so much. There is a lot of land which is very difficult to develop because of those former brick kilns. So again, the infrastructure there will be expensive, and probably the commuting trips in Calcutta will be longer than a city which is radioconcentric like Ahmedabad, for instance, because of this linear nature. The distance between the traditional CBD and the new city, I don't know what it is, but I will guess it's more than 50 kilometers. Is it correct?
Yes.
Something like that, yes. And that's a very long trip, between two centers. And again, the labor market, don't forget, will work. It's a labor market of Calcutta. You don't want it to be fragmented. Therefore, people would have a commute probably a longer time than if they were in Ahmedabad. But then you could be very imaginative in transport, having, for instance, transport will complement each other. I don't believe that in a modern city you will have just one mean of transport. Where, you should have many different mode of transport, depending on the what type of trip you do at what time and things like that. And even within the same trip, maybe take a motor taxi to bring you to a station and things like that. And so what's important now that India is developing really mass transit very seriously is to look at the access to the station. So you could have this multi-mode of transport at the station. And for instance, I remember in Mumbai some years ago looking at the station then of the commuter highway, and they were trying to ban rickshaw. They thought the rickshaw were creating congestion, where in fact they should have designed something that many rickshaw could come and go rather than being clogged. And that's the problem with a transport company. They look at the operation of their company. They don't look at transport from a metropolitan point of view. That's why they are reluctant to work with other means of transport which should complement them. And I think that in Calcutta, this transport issue, because of the shape of the city dictated by the topography, is a very important issue.
So we'll take just one last question. Or maybe just two, very, very quickly, you can just put those questions.
And
I'm Priyanshu from
Hello, sir. I'm Priyanshu, second year student from infrastructure planning. So, sir, the question is like in case of Ahmedabad Sabarmati Riverfront Development Project, there was a the land was reclaimed and there was the land was supposed to be sold and it was a self-financing project. But then the CBD shifted towards SG Highway and then the plan is not what it is, what it was predicted. So in that case, what would have been done to not let this situation happen? And is this even under our control? Like when we plan for projects, it's usually for 20 years, even sector plans are for 20 years. And in this case, the market is free, land prices are very volatile. So is this under our control? Like when we plan for such projects?
I hope it's not under your control. You have to abandon the idea that you are like if you are an architect and you have a client, you have to design a building with all the details, and if the contractor decides to move a door from one side to another, you should stop him. The plan has to be done exactly as planned. A city is not a building. It's made of building, but it's not a building. A city is made for the people who come here. And when you are designing something, a master plan, you are talking about a master plan for the thing, you are planning for people who maybe are not yet in the city. So you do not, your client is not the IS officer who is supervising your project. Sorry. Your clients are people who are, some of them are already in the city, some of them will migrate to the city, some of them are probably not born yet. So you have to leave these people with, when they come to the city, the choice of what they want to do. So if the center moved to an area that you have not foretold, probably there was something wrong in your center. People do not do that just to contradict the planner. They do that just because it's better for them to go somewhere else. And so you have to find what mistake did you do? Maybe you didn't do a mistake, you just didn't anticipate the type of people who were coming. And so you have to adapt to this new situation. I don't think that there is any virtue in implementing a plan if this plan is not succeeding. In a way, that's a case where you say, well, I did my best, but I was wrong. And anybody who invents something, sometime invents something who doesn't work, or it doesn't work the first time. You have to do it 2 or 3 times before it works. What is wrong is to say, it doesn't work, but my God, I'm going to make it work. That means forcing people where they don't want to go.
With that, we'll end this session. Thank you so much, Alain, for a very interesting session. And very